Center Thomas Bryant has been traded to the Pacers, but is it the first of other moves to come from Miami? We'll break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up today at Robinhood.com/gold. I have a great show for you today. The Warriors are making moves, but that doesn't disqualify them from trading for Jimmy Butler potentially. And Erik Spoelstra gets a chance at redemption on Monday night. But let's start with the news that the Miami Heat on Sunday traded Thomas Bryant to the Pacers for a second-round pick swap in 2031. The key here is that the move clears the way for the Heat to promote Dru Smith to the 15-man roster. David, what do you think about the trade?
Quick aside, 2031. That sounds like an eternity from now. So incredible that this is the final deal is for a trade. For a second-round pick that seems so far in advance. But anyway, what are you
pick swap?
Pick swap. Sorry. It's not unexpected entirely, I guess. They had a glut at center between Khalil Ware, obviously playing in the Sioux Falls, Kevin Love taking the bulk of those minutes, Thomas Bryant kind of getting in there when Love wasn't really available or, out due to injury. And kind of just in thinking back at Bryant's short tenure with Miami, somewhat disappointing. Speaking of feeling like an eternity, remember when Bobby Marks of ESPN said that Miami had the best 1-2 center tandem in the league after signing Thomas Bryant? And I know a lot of us were kind of high on the fumes of Miami's run to the finals, but after Bryant had gotten, a championship ring with the Denver Nuggets against these same Miami Heat players, now they signed him and he was supposed to bring veteran leadership, etc. But he wound up never really contributing. And you could see early on that he just wasn't a Miami-type player in the sense that he couldn't really contribute on the defensive end, and he never really had a chance to blossom offensively if he was ever going to be able to do that in the first place. So I think the move makes a lot of sense, and I like the fact that the front office worked together with Bryant and his agent to kind of get him back to a deal where he was going to get some playing time. At least that's the report, is that he was getting more playing time in Indiana. He returns to his home state, I believe, and then he also where he played collegiate ball in Indiana. Yeah. So it works out really well, and I think it's a smart move for both the team and for the player themselves.
Yeah, so the Pacers part of this, Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman, they're two backup centers behind Miles Turner, both out with Achilles injuries for the rest of the season. Yeah. So they were in desperate need. I do the Locked On NBA show with Tony East, who also on Tuesday nights, and he's the host of Locked On Pacers. And he kind of gave me a heads up like last week after we were done recording the Tuesday episode that he was like, yeah, you know what? Don't be surprised if the Pacers are pretty aggressive in pursuing Thomas Bryant. I was like, oh, okay. I kind of put that one back in my back pocket, kind of bookmarked that. And then, the trade goes down. Tony texts me. He's like, see, told you. So he saw this coming. And it was sort of an obvious fit too, right? You look around the league, teams that maybe had, like you said, a glut at backup center. The Pacers needed a backup center. Thomas Bryant was making the minimum. It was very easy to trade for him. So Indiana was basically able to absorb his salary without sending any salary back because they didn't have the Pacers, they don't have like a bunch of smaller salaries to work with necessarily, especially ones that they don't want to give up. So yeah, this trade just always made sense if you were kind of tinkering around with the trade machine as a Pacers fan and you're like, what backup center can we get? So it always made sense that they were going to call Miami. And then you already mentioned the Indiana, connection there with Thomas Bryant. I'm gonna miss Thomas Bryant though. Like he was the sideline MVP, always going crazy in terms of celebrations. Like I love his kung fu stuff during the intros for the starting lineup. Like he was always so much fun, and he was a good locker room guy. But you're right, it never really worked. Defensively, Erik Spoelstra never got to the point of trusting him. And then offensively, I thought it sapped his potential not having a real lob thrower on this roster. There was never a point guard who could get Thomas Bryant the ball the way that he needed the ball. And so it just never really was a fit. And it wasn't a fit even last year. And I think that's why everybody was kind of surprised that they re-signed him. But I think they re-signed him just because everybody liked him. And it was a bad free agency class. They're like, we need depth at center. They didn't know that they're going to, they didn't know what they were going to do in the draft and all this stuff yet. And so they're like, you know what, I let's just go get this guy, or I guess they already had done the draft. Never mind. So it was already like they were like, let's just go get this guy. We can use that. Whatever. The other part of this now is that by clearing that spot, not bringing the player back, the Heat have 13 players under contract. Well, you need to have 14 for the NBA minimum. You can have a maximum of 15 guys on the standard roster. So they have now 14 days to fill that roster spot. And the player that they're going to promote is Dru Smith. They're just gonna sign Dru Smith. They're gonna promote him from the two-way contract. They're gonna bring him up to the regular roster. Well deserved by Dru Smith. He was on the regular roster last year before the ACL injury knocked him out for the whole season. They bring him back on that two-way. He's way outperformed the two-way contract. He deserves to be on the regular roster. He's been a core part of this rotation during this 4-game win streak, has played all 12 minutes of the fourth quarter of the last 3 games. This just makes a lot of sense.
It's not a foregone conclusion, is it? I mean, I know
It's
we're saying
done.
that. Okay.
I mean, it's not officially done for sure. I mean, I
Right.
guess if something crazy, that's the plan is for them to promote Dru Smith.
I believe, and I agree with you. At the same time, in the past, the Heat have kind of left this roster spot open. So in case there's a buyout option, are they far enough under the cap where they can explore a buyout player, or are they, because of where they are against the first apron,
I guess it would depend. So they have to sign somebody within 14 days.
That I know, yes.
We start getting to buyout guys in February. So like the timing of, but it depends on what kind of contract they sign. Are they going to sign Dru Smith to a non-guaranteed deal where they can waive him down the line? Potentially. I don't know. I think I don't know what they'll do. They can either do a solid by Dru Smith and say, let's just get you now, or they can wait the full 14 days and save themselves a little bit of money against the salary cap. Either way, they can sign him and stay below the apron. That's the important part, the second apron. That's the important part here. Whether or not they sign him now or wait the 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's just a matter, I think the report was that they'd probably wait the full 2 weeks to save every last penny they possibly can. And he's already under the two-way contract anyway. It sucks for Dru, but I mean, eventually he'll get his money. So I like the move. I mean, I just, my thought process tends to gravitate towards, you got a roster spot open, and this team has historically filled that spot with a veteran when they become available because the rest of the roster has already been filled out. But two-way contracts makes everything just a little bit differently than the way that they've negotiated, approached these things in the past. So in terms of promoting Dru, I like the move. I mean, it feels like a far cry from where we would have been a month and a half ago, where a lot of people wondered why Dru Smith is even on the roster, and he wasn't really contributing, he wasn't really playing. But since then, like, his defense has been great, his spark has been great. He's providing some minimal offense, but just enough so that he can continue to, balance out what he brings in the defensive end. And the Heat also typically say, you know what, we like a guy who's been in our system. He's worked hard. He's earned this opportunity, and we're going to promote him as a result, believing in, kind of paying him back for what he's contributed thus far and will probably contribute in the future. Although I don't know that he has much upside beyond where he's at right now. I mean, I think this might be, and I feel maybe that's a little cold to say, but I think it's also a little realistic that there's probably not much beyond what we've seen from Dru Smith that he's going to be able to unlock down the road. And yet this is still a pretty well-deserved reward for what he's contributed and can likely contribute in the future.
Yeah, I mean, they're signing him for a minimum contract, and if all he is this, which is a helpful part of a rotation that's been winning a bunch of games, and that's okay at a minimum contract, right? And so that's just fine. Eric Spoelstra at the end in his post-game press conference the other night was asked about Dru Smith. He goes, when you find guys that just do winning things on both ends of the court and over and over and over, that can be consistent to that. That's a superpower in this league. Everybody is searching for that, but he's the glue that fits and can make any unit work. He was basically saying, like, we're going to sign this guy. Like, just wait. We're about to trade Thomas Bryant to the Pacers, and we're going to promote Dru Smith. He was kind of saying that in that quote, and it was kind of funny to go back and hear that and read that after the fact. One little other part here. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say that Spoke quote, though. Isn't that like just kind of zigging when the rest of the league is zagging, though? Like, I mean, I think he's wrong. Like, I mean, it's not a knock necessarily. And I mean, I know their approach has worked to some extent, but I mean, a lot of teams don't just look for a guy who's kind of bottomed out or topped off at like a mid guy and isn't going to continue to improve. A lot of people take a swing for the fences and hoping that, they'll find some undiscovered talent.
I think that was the case, but the league, like, depth is really important these days, and guys that you trust, and it just feels like a lot of teams want these kind of connector glue guy types now, right? And so the other part of this now is that the Heat will open up a two-way contract in a couple of weeks when they do promote Dru Smith. And there's a couple of names, there's a lot of guys in Sioux Falls who've been really impressive, but the guy that I think most people are kind of circling is Isaiah Stevens, the guy that a lot of fans had hoped was going to take Dru Smith's two-way spot in the first place. And so you promote Dru Smith here, maybe you get a chance to also promote Isaiah Stevens to that two-way contract. I think that part is a little bit more open than this Dru Smith deal, but I would imagine Isaiah Stevens has probably got the inside track, leader in the clubhouse, but that could be changed. And they don't have to promote anybody from Sioux Falls either. If they want to fill this two-way contract spot, they can kind of do it with anybody who's technically a free agent. If they want to, or anybody in the G League who's not on a two-way contract either. All right, we have more news on the Jimmy Butler front. There's more smoke around the Warriors' potential pursuit. We'll tell you why this weekend's trades might increase speculation of Jimmy Butler going to the Bay Area. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. You don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%, because Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms to apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, and rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. You know what? It's the holidays. For some people, it's not necessarily the greatest time, but for others, it's a time to kind of connect with family, to kind of enjoy the season, to enjoy the spirit of the holidays. And there's so many things that make you happy. And maybe you're trying to find a way to stay cozy. And maybe you're just trying to find a way to kind of continue to improve yourself and appreciate that coziness. Therapy is a great way of bringing yourself some comfort that never goes away, even when the seasons do change. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire, and in a matter of minutes, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So find comfort this December and beyond with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team now has a free daily newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter, one stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shearer, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. David, I want to read you something that Jake Fisher wrote in the Stein line on Sunday while reporting on the Warriors trading for Dennis Schroeder from the Nets. He says, quote, "The true beauty of the move for the Warriors is twofold. One, they did not need to surrender any first-round draft compensation to get a player who can help immediately. And two, here's an important part for Miami Heat fans, Schroeder could still be packaged with other Warriors in a subsequent trade this season because the Brooklyn deal was completed before December 16th. Translation, the Warriors can continue to be a trade suitor for Miami's Jimmy Butler or any other star-level players they wish to pursue before the February 6th trade deadline. They've given themselves an instant boost and more time to plot the splashier, significant swing that rival teams have been anticipating," end quote. So, David, there's more and more buzz around specifically the Warriors and Jimmy Butler, and all the reporting, even beyond the Shams stuff, points to Golden State being aggressive before the trade deadline in February. So, look, my takeaway from this is this. If you thought Shams was lying before because Bernie Lee called him out on Twitter, we now have Mark Stein, Jake Fisher, Brian Windhorst, Paul Pierce, Raja Bell over the weekend. Just a bunch of people now saying that Jimmy Butler might not be long for Miami, and a few of those people even going so far as to tie Jimmy Butler potentially to Golden State here. So again, like if you thought Shams was lying, there's a lot of people out here connecting these dots, and even just saying connecting these dots might be doing it a disservice. I mean, you've got Jake Fisher here just straight up writing, the Warriors can still pursue Jimmy Butler, and a lot of rival executives expect them to do that. So what do you make of all of this?
Again, I just feel like the language is kind of vague in that sense. You know, they can pursue him. Yeah, they can. That doesn't mean they're going to. That doesn't mean they have enough. And the kind of counter this idea that, you know, teams, especially Golden State, might be actively or aggressively looking to add Jimmy Butler, we've also heard reports from a number of sources that Miami wants fair value, quote unquote, fair value for Jimmy Butler. And we have a hard time looking at, I think, Golden State's roster and assuming that they're going to get fair value for Jimmy. I don't think they have the kind of package of players and picks that Miami might be interested in. And especially if they're looking for a win now player so they can continue to compete this season, get younger, get talented, and, add something to the roster, add someone to the roster that's going to help them in the short term and in the long term. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
I know the adage of smoke, there's fire. I still don't see it working out necessarily with Golden State. I mean, we talked about it when the news first came up or the Shams report first came out. I just don't know that anything has changed dramatically, even with the addition of Schroeder. I don't think Schroeder is somebody that's on Miami's radar. And I certainly don't think they're looking to add him, especially if they're going to convert Dru Smith into a regular contract. I just don't think that Schroeder is the kind of guy that they're looking to add to this roster specifically as a win now player.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? So if something did change, right, it's just sort of like that DeAnthony Melton expiring contract, a guy who's out for the season because of an injury is now replaced with the Dennis Schroeder expiring contract. So I guess in a vacuum, you say, well, this guy can play, Dennis Schroeder, and the other guy couldn't. So if you're looking for win now players, Schroeder is clearly more of a winning now player than DeAnthony Melton is at this point because he's available. Okay, cool, great. I don't know how much Schroeder makes sense to the Miami Heat roster also, especially one that already has Terry Rozier on it, right? It has Tyler Hero. I don't really know. Like, if you just drop Schroeder on this roster right now, I'm sure he would play. I just don't really know where he would play. He's a good player. Like, I don't, but
if it's a third team, if it's a 3-team deal, however, if Schroeder gets moved to a team that does need a point guard services, that makes some sense. And then maybe that's a way of getting Miami what they want.
Yeah, you're right. And maybe I don't know, Miami gets another draft pick because Schroeder is going away or something like that. So the trade that it would be, I guess, would look something. It would start with Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, I would imagine, and Dennis Schroeder, I suppose. It would be those three. You'd probably need, and you would need another salary either going to Miami or a third team to help facilitate this deal. But yeah, if you're Miami, you're looking, okay, we're going to get Wiggins, Kuminga, and now Dennis Schroeder instead of DeAnthony Melton. And can we get you to give us a 2031 first-round pick or a 2025 first-round pick? The Warriors, I think, have 2 firsts that they can move, and I think those are the 2. I think I have that right. Yeah, I don't know. For Jimmy Butler, is that fair value? I don't think so. It doesn't feel like enough, but could Miami convince them to throw in a Brandon Podziemski or something, or another pick or some sort of other asset? I don't know. But yeah, that's why I keep kind of coming back to this too. It's a lot of people are tying the Heat to the Warriors, and that kind of trade just feels like the Heat would be settling. So I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing here, or there's a third team that can get involved to add more stuff. But right now, that feels like it would be settling.
I mean, maybe this is a conversation we had last week right now, but your gut, give me your gut instinct. Do they move him before the trade deadline?
There's just so many people reporting that it feels like we're going in that direction. I don't know. I don't know. And then I think about it and I'm like, there's no way that they could do that, right? Like, it's just why. And so the other part of this too is that, yes, you risk Jimmy Butler walking away for nothing, but I don't think that the Heat are necessarily that worried about Jimmy walking away just nothing. There's not a lot of teams with cap space. Houston would be the one that I think they could basically get Fred VanVleet off the books. They have like a team option on him, I think. And then that can open up a lot of salary, and maybe that's something that they could do. They would also have to make some other sort of trades, but that's something that they could do. And then Brooklyn obviously has all the cap space. Is Jimmy really going to go to the Brooklyn Nets? They stink. And they're going to trade all their good players. They just traded one of them. They just traded Dennis Schroeder. So I don't really see that happening, but I also don't know what the market for Jimmy Butler is going to be. I flatly don't see a team giving him a max contract at 35 going into his age 36 season. I could be wrong. Teams have done silly things, but we live in this new CBA where teams, we've seen this last summer, really reluctant to come up to give up that kind of money. So,
trying to eliminate silly things from happening. That's
right, exactly.
Is, yeah.
So I don't know, and then obviously there's the possibility of a sign and trade where the Heat wouldn't be losing Jimmy Butler for nothing, but all that stuff is very complicated. So the other part of this too is I think the Heat have decided either we probably don't have a long-term, if the Heat have decided that they don't have a long-term future with Jimmy Butler, then it would make sense to be open to this trade. Like, hey, blow us away before the deadline. Yeah. And if not, we could do this as a sign and trade over the summer and when maybe there's some other options out there. But whether or not it's before the deadline or in the summer, it just does kind of because of all the reporting around it, kind of feels like this is going to come to an end within the calendar year. I mean, where are you on this?
I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. I think he'll opt out, and I think they'll wind up signing him to a more team friendly deal. If I had to, again, say what I think is going to happen, I think they love the idea. Like, we've heard rumblings that they're frustrated with him, and we saw what happened with Pat Riley last year. But I think a little bit of that is overblown. He is a unique and somewhat temperamental superstar. And I think as a result, you're always going to get some kind of a friction, especially with an office that is much more rigid and also, kind of built around this idea of we're a family. Jimmy's kind of not the family type, and I think he's, as much as he is his own family, and that's
he's more of like a
fine.
Lone wolf kind of thing going on.
Yeah. So I just also think that they'd want to reward him. Like, we're talking about them rewarding Dru Smith and all his journey and everything else like that. Given what Jimmy has accomplished for this roster and this team over the last 5.5 seasons now, I think they would want him to stay with the Miami Heat, even if that means capping what they're capable of in the short term. Like, I think that's just reality. You said it many, many times. The championship window for this team has been closed for some time. It's closed now, but they can ride out Jimmy for as long as he's going to be on this roster and continue to enjoy a middling level of success, because maybe that's an acceptable place to be for now. Like, there's no path towards a championship for this current group unless they do the unthinkable, which is blow it up and trade everybody. And that's just not something that Pat Riley has ever entertained. They just never operated. They at least need one foundational star. And in 2008, it was Dwayne. With good reason. They'd already won a championship too. I don't even think they view Bam, for as much as they love him internally, I don't think they view Bam as that kind of centerpiece superstar to build around.
Right, not the number one option, number one scorer,
right.
Not the guy who can like lead to.
Right.
But certainly they're building around him or with him or whatever. But
that's fair. That's fair.
I guess the only thing I would say is if the Heat think that they're going to get something back for Jimmy Butler, if they get an offer that they say, okay, then we could take this and then move that in the summer for a superstar,
X player, yeah,
right. Like, they could do that part of it where, okay, like the Warriors are giving us all the picks, a bunch of young players. Like now all of a sudden we're a team that doesn't have a lot of draft capital. Now we do have a lot of draft capital, right? The Heat have never been in a position where they've traded a good player for a bunch of draft picks. They've never done that, right? Like, Dwayne Wade left for nothing when he went to Chicago. Right. LeBron left for nothing in 2014. Like, Alonzo Mourning, like the end of his career was so strange with the kidney stuff. Like, they never had an opportunity to turn him into something
as a free agent
different.
with New Jersey, yeah.
Right, exactly. And so this is like kind of the first time in franchise history that the Heat have had an opportunity to take an all-star level guy, a star player in this league, and say, well, our window is closed, but we can move him and get something back that helps us kind of kickstart the next era. And I just wonder how like I said, we've never seen them in this situation. And that's what's so fascinating about it, because we have no sort of concept of what they would do. There's no history here, right? There's no precedent for it. And so it's fascinating. Anyway, coming up, the Heat play in Detroit tonight. They'll have a big advantage that they didn't have last time that these teams played when the Heat lost. We'll tell you what that is. We'll preview Monday night's game after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, just $5, and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. I know if you're a Dolphins fan, you probably don't even want to think about NFL action right now. But let's say you'll come around eventually, because you are, like my friend Wes here, resigned to the idea that the Dolphins are just going to continue losing throughout the rest of his existence. And if that's the case, you still like watching football. And sometimes you're watching a game, you're in the middle of a game, or you get a hunch, you want to check out the latest stats, we want to view live play-by-play, or you can do that and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets, but only when you visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, but only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. The Heat will play the Pistons in Detroit tonight. Of course, we remember Eric Spoelstra costing the Heat a game, or a chance to win the game, rather, when he called a timeout without having one in the final seconds of a game earlier this season. They end up losing in overtime. But the Heat are in a much better spot now. They're a better team, 4-game win streak than they were the last time that these teams played. But what are you watching on this one, David?
I want to see what version of the team we'll get, because we saw against the Toronto Raptors, they started off kind of clunkily and they kind of abandoned some of the good habits that they developed during the 3-game win streak that they had prior to that win. And they wound up getting a spark from Nikola Jovic. Unfortunately, he's going to be out due to an ankle sprain. He's not going to be traveling with the team. So they're going to need a spark from somebody. And this is a much pluckier version of the Detroit Pistons than they've been in years past. This isn't the team that lost an NBA record number of games to start a season or anything like that. This is a much better team, even though they're still, 6 games below 500. That's a significant improvement from where they were last year. And they've got some nice talent, some players that have challenged Miami. As you pointed out, they beat Miami previously. So to me, I'm looking at what version of the Heat will get and whether or not they respond and see this team, the Pistons team, as a legitimate challenge and rise to the occasion, because we've seen them kind of play down in the past. Hopefully they can avoid that and bring out some of the same good traits that we saw in the second half against the Toronto Raptors and in the previous 3 games that they had won.
Yeah, you mentioned the Nico injury there. So just a quick injury report update here. No Nikola Jovic from Miami, no Josh Richardson, no Pelle Larsson. All those guys are out. For Detroit, they'll be without Tobias Harris. They will have Jalen Duren, who's kind of day-to-day.
I think both of them are listed at game time decisions according to ESPN's report. But I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so they're not. Duren's not even on the injury report that came out at 5:30. So I don't.
Okay.
And now Tobias Harris is out. But so TBD,
Okay.
just something to monitor, I suppose. The Heat will have Jimmy Butler back. The Heat did not have Jimmy Butler the last time that these teams played, and the way that Jimmy's been playing lately, obviously that's a big addition for the Heat to have. The Heat were also still starting like Kevin Love and Bam Adebayo at the same time the last time that these teams played. So and also Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier were still at starting backcourt. So the Heat are a very different team than the last time that these teams played. They're playing much better overall. You're right. You want to avoid the clunky start. The Pistons are a team that, to say that they have had Miami's number it would be wrong, right? Because the Heat have won most of these games, except for the last time that these teams, but have weirdly been really competitive against Miami, even dating back to last season, like the start of last season. So you're just like, all right, can you just beat a bad team? Like this, the Pistons are not that good. They're fun to watch. They're feistier. Like they could be in the play-in tournament this year. Like they are not as bad as they've been in the last couple of years. But the Heat should still win this game. And I want to see a couple of things specifically. Who guards Cade Cunningham? Because he has been playing better. And I think that might fall on Jimmy Butler, although I could see them maybe going with Haywood Highsmith again on that. But Jimmy took the Donovan Mitchell assignment against Cleveland. Like he's kind of been stepping up defensively. Like I think it would be up to, if Jimmy says, I want Cade, they'll just give him Cade. But I could also see a world where he's the guy that's trying to contain Jaden Ivey. But either way, it'll probably be Highsmith and Jimmy on Cade and Ivey. So one way or the other, it's those two guys against Detroit's best 2 offensive players. And then I want to see what Bam does. Like, can he go off against Jalen Duren or Isaiah Stewart or both of them? Like, he had 20 points on 8 of 13 shooting the last time these teams played, so it wasn't a bad game in the midst of the Bam slump, but he's been playing better lately. I think they're going to need a big Bam game in this one on both ends.
Yeah, no doubt. He needs to kind of get into that kind of comfortable rhythm that we've seen him get. Like, obviously, he had a lot of fourth quarter points against Jakob Poeltl and the Raptors, a couple 3-pointers. I think this team and the physicality that Duren and Stewart both have is a little different. It kind of challenges him in a way that he doesn't necessarily respond to well. So I think if he has that bounce back game, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't consider, looking ahead, I wouldn't think that Bam's going to be as much of a factor as we hope he might. They seem to find a way to negate what he can do well. So I would look more to Tyler Hero continuing what he had against the Pistons that game, especially when he went off in the second half and almost single-handedly brought that team back to a chance to win before the gaffe by Eric Spoelstra. So that's what I'm looking for.
40 points the last time. Yeah. That was a special Tyler Hero game. It'll be also, with no Tobias Harris, does Detroit go Stewart and Duren in the front court, or do they go like Duren with like maybe a Simone Fontecchio in that forward spot to space the floor? It'll be Fontecchio burnt Miami twice last year, 20 plus points. So some stuff like a random scrub. Heat killer here, a team that has given the Heat problems over the last couple of years. So yeah, good test for Miami in Detroit here. But we will have our post-game reactions for you after the game on Monday night. For now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.